I closed a £500,000 deal without even asking, would you like to go ahead? In fact, I never even asked them if they were interested. What I did instead was so simple yet so psychologically powerful, but that by the end of the conversation, they were literally asking me how they can get started. And today in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the same assumption-based psychology that made me a £500,000 transaction fall literally into my lap without even having to ask for it. Now, look, the key around learning this stuff, my friends, is very, very simple. It's not about the product. It's not about the service. It's not about the lead. It's got absolutely everything to do with how you influence people and how you communicate with them. Because if you don't understand the basics of human psychology, if you don't understand the basics of interacting with people, then you're not going to get very far in life. Now, for many of you who follow me or watch my stuff, we all know I used to be a nurse. I used to be a psychiatric nurse. And I was having a conversation with another nurse the other day about something that's gone in the nursing world. In fact, it's gone in the whole medical field, in my opinion. Have you noticed that these days, a lot of the younger nurses, a lot of the younger doctors, or younger medics lack social skills? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that years ago, you'd go into a hospital or you go into a ward setting or a clinic of some sort, and you'd find that people were a lot more talkative. The nurses cared a bit more. The doctors had what we call your bedside manner. Yeah, they had all of these things, and it's disappeared in society. And the problem with that is because whether you like it or not, whether people are good at communicating or not, at the end of the day, we're still human beings. We have the same human needs, we have the same triggers, we have the same emotions, we have the same feelings. And if you're not learning how to bring back that bedside manner, if you're not learning how to actually communicate with people and making them feel comfortable, then you are going to struggle. Why? Because most people are just using scripts and techniques to close people when it comes to selling. So I want to give you a different perspective in this video. I want to give you some insights, and I'm going to encourage you to think differently moving forwards, because at the end of the day, it's something you can learn. Even if you're a young person right now who's going, yeah, you know what, Jess, I'm that person. Like, I love selling, I love my business, I love what I do, but I don't really have those interpersonal skills. I'm not a very likable person, or I don't have much personality. You can learn all of this stuff when you know how. And the way you learn this is by going back to basics. So first, I want to talk to you about this deal that I got over the line by using the exact same stuff. And then I want to teach you what you can perhaps start doing right now to shift how you currently have sales conversations with people. Now, here's the thing. Before you go and speak to someone, it's important that you lay some foundations before you go and speak to that person. Because in my invisible sales method, which is my unique methodology that I teach people inside of my Invisible Sales Academy, there are 4 simple principles. And the first principle is what we call cultivate. Cultivate is where 80% of the selling's done. So to keep it simple, before you even go and meet a prospect or have a call with them or whatever it is, you've got to do the pre-work. So what I did with this particular prospect is I did a lot of pre-work before I actually went and met them. I started exploring what their desire was to have their problem solved in the first place, what they'd tried before. Why did they even want to speak to me? How could I potentially solve their problem when there's loads of people out there that could potentially solve their problem too? Now, to put it into perspective, this particular deal was a property transaction that I was actually negotiating for myself, for my own portfolio. And speaking to this particular person, I was very honest with them. I'm not the only person that can take this deal off your hands. So why are you talking to me? So I almost pushed them away a little bit while I was doing that. So what can you learn from that? I want you to stop being so desperate and jumping onto people the minute they express some kind of interest in you. What we want to do instead is have a kind of a with or without you attitude. It's like, hey, look, whether you work with me or not, it's all good. My life goes on. Now, the key is balance, my friends. You can't do it in a cocky way. You can't do it in an ungrateful way. Look, I'm grateful for every prospect that expresses an interest in us, but I'm also aware that I'm not the only person that can solve their problem. And I want to make sure that I'm the right person for them and they're the right person for me. And if we're not a great fit, then you can have your problem solved somewhere else. I'm not going to beg you or chase you because it's all good. There's plenty to go around, right? So it's very important that you do that. So I did this with this prospect right from early doors. I kind of pushed them away a little bit. I then started sharing with them some commonalities that I picked up during this conversation. So speaking to this particular person, I realized that actually there's someone who likes to do good. They like to give back to society. They want to help people. Now, interestingly enough, I didn't get into nursing for the money. Look, I was born and bred in the UK. I could have gone in any single profession that I wanted to. I went into nursing because I cared about people. Now, you could take me out of nursing, but you can't take the nurse out of me, right? I'm always going to care for people. So whilst I was speaking to this person, I picked up on the fact that they too are someone who likes to do good and help other people. They too had similarities in personal things, like, for example, loved ones having some challenges with their health. I also have loved ones that got challenges with their health. So what I'm trying to say is I picked up on some commonalities during our initial conversation, again, all in the pre-work, right? That allowed me to lay the foundations to have a stronger relationship before I actually met them. And just by talking into the fact that they also want to do good, and me being a former nurse, and also my intentions for this particular transaction was to do good too, etc., 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 I created some synergy and some alignment. Just by doing that, I displaced 90% of the competition who were also interested in this deal. Because they were transactional, I was transformational. There's a big difference. And the prospect knew that. So it's key. Now, if I didn't do that bit of rapport building and that bit of digging right there, when I went to meet them, I wouldn't have closed the deal, or I would have struggled to close the deal. Is that making sense? So what I want you to do is make sure before you go and meet someone that you do everything that you can to do some pre-work. Find some common grounds. Find the drivers. Push them away if you have to push them. Get them to question themselves. Well, why should they go with me? There's loads of people out there. Why would you even want to talk to me? We've got to push people away if it feels appropriate, right? So do some pre-work first. So once I did the pre-work, it set the meeting up nicely. Now, there was a lot more that went on, and I don't want to bore you on this video, but it set the meeting up to the point that when I actually went and met the prospect face to face and I went and viewed the property, guess what happened? We felt like we knew each other already. We did. It was like I was talking to an old friend. That's the magic of invisible sales, my friends. If you can build that pre-work up, when you actually have your sales call or your sales meeting, or you meet them face to face, however you're having your sales conversation, it feels like you're talking to someone you know already. And that is the art of it, because traditionally, here's what's happening. We're getting told to warm people up, right? Stick them into a nurture sequence, warm them up. This is traditional marketing stuff. Warm people up, get them warm. They need 11 touches before they actually want to buy from you. No, all that kind of stuff. You can get rid of all of that in one simple communication with the prospect, which is what we call the pre-sale, in the cultivate stage of the invisible sales method. And because I did that so well, and this is what I teach my students as well, by the way, when I did it so well, that initial first face-to-face encounter with a prospect, it was like we were friends. We even hugged. Like that's how it was like, oh, it's so good to see you. And this is the beauty of it, guys, right? Because now I've done a lot of the heavy lifting. I've got rapport with them. We've got alignment. We've got commonality. Feel like we know each other already. In sales, they call this dropping the shoulders or relaxing the shoulders. She was relaxed. There was no pressure. It was all good, right? And anyway, the point is, now we're into what we call the sale, which is the second pillar of the invisible sales method. Okay, now we're into the second part where we connect with the prospect. Okay, so this was very easy for me because we already had a bit of a relationship. We felt like we knew each other already. The shoulders were dropped, and all we did was just have conversations. And I allowed her to speak more than me. And the key around this, my friends, is to be a great listener. Great sales professionals ask really good questions, and then they shut their mouth and they allow the prospect to speak. Because traditionally what happens is in sales, you get taught to puke all over the prospect. Tell them everything. Tell them the benefits, the features, how amazing you are. And sometimes the prospect doesn't feel like they're getting a word in edgeways. Don't do that stuff. Allow the prospect to speak. However, you control the narrative. And the only way that you're going to control the narrative is if you ask questions. Because at the end of the day, he or she who asks questions is usually in control. So that basically means, my friends, you've got to ask more questions. What can you ask the prospect? What can you ask them that will allow them to give you information that you need, but also make them feel heard and listened to? Because in selling and in marketing, the goal isn't for you to make the prospect understand you. It's for them to feel understood by you. And the best way you can do that is by asking specific questions that will allow them to open up. So remember, he or she who asks questions is usually in control. So let them speak, but you're in control. Is that making sense? Okay. So I just asked a series of questions that allowed the prospect to start opening up a little bit more about what were their motivations was for selling, why did they want to do this, what was it in it for them, difference would it make in their life, what was the bleeding neck problem, was there a time urgency around this, or could they wait, and what's the bigger vision, what's the bigger picture. I learned more about their personal life, because like at the end of the day, just because you're selling someone in a transactional way doesn't mean it's not going to impact their personal life. So I kind of information gathered all of these things to the point where I naturally then segued into teeing up the close. But the interesting thing about this particular conversation is I didn't actually ask for the sale. They asked me. And I'll talk to you about that in a second. But the beauty of that is if you do the connection part in my program correctly. So remember, in the invisible sales method, we've got cultivate, which is the pre-work, okay? Then we've got connect, which is the actual pitch, okay? Then we've got the close, which is actually asking for the money. And then we've got continue, which is your aftercare and your continuity, okay? Now, with the close, this time, I did the connect so well that I didn't even have to ask for the sale. The close came to me, okay? Now, in most cases, that doesn't happen, just for full disclosure. In most cases, you've done the connect so well that it allows you to bridge nicely into asking for the sale, where there's less friction here when you're asking for the sale and they actually give you their money, right? So here's the thing. For me, I got it to the position where the prospect actually asked me if I would take this property off their hands. And they without me even asking, they gave it to me below market value. They even allowed me to not pay them fully up front. And why am I telling you this? Is because I used my invisible sales method by just understanding people's behavior, having conversations with them, building a relationship with them, and not following a flipping script. Is this making sense? Okay? You've got to be a better conversationalist. And it's something that you can learn very, very quickly if you want to. Look, my clients learn this stuff in a matter of days, weeks even, okay? It's not rocket science. It's just learning how to ask simple questions, respond to what's coming out of the prospect's mouth, looking at their body language, analyzing their behavior, listening to their tonality, and knowing where to steer the conversation afterwards. Make sense? So by doing this, the close came to me. I was able to tee up the sale, close the deal without even asking. And that, my friends, is how I landed a £500,000 transaction without even asking for it, and by outselling my competition without even freaking trying. So what could you do differently now? I want to invite you, my friend, to think differently right now. Next time you have a meeting booked into your diary, next time you have a prospect land into your pipeline, I want you to spend a lot more time in the cultivate section of the invisible sales method. This is where you are doing the pre-work. This is when you're asking certain questions, you're building relationships, you're building rapport, because the goal is very simple. I want you to have your first sales call or sales meeting with the prospect, and it must feel like you're speaking to a friend or someone that you know already. If you've done the pre-work well, that first conversation will feel like you know them already. And I want you to pick up on stuff in the pre-work that you can bring up on your sales call. If you spoke about them, about their family, and you found out what their wife's name was or their husband's name was, you can ask them like, "Hey, Johnny, how's Johnny today?" Or how's Jane, or whatever. You can, it's almost like you're talking to a dear friend. Does that make sense? So I'm going to invite you in the pre-work to do a lot more work with them. Push them away if you have to push them away. Then when you get onto your actual sales call, I want you to start asking better questions. Ask them questions about what brought them onto the call. Ask them questions about what's going to change if they, if this problem goes away tomorrow. Just dig a bit deeper. Ask them more what questions, who questions, where questions, how questions, like why questions. I want you to dig deep and ask more questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because what did I say? He or she who asks questions is usually in control. And when you start asking the right questions, you get the right information. And when you get the right information, the prospect closes themselves. It's very simple. Have you ever had a situation where you had a question to ask, and when you asked that question, by explaining what you meant, you kind of answered it yourself? You ever had that before? That's invisible sales. When you learn how to ask the right questions, the prospect actually convinces themselves that they want to work with you, just like my prospect did that allowed me to land that particular deal. And if you do this correctly, either you'll hit it big by not even having to close, because they'll literally go take my money, or asking for the sale is so much easier because they've already bought. If that makes any sense, okay? So that's, my friends, is exactly how I was able to take a prospect and close a £500,000 transaction, have it literally fall into my lap without even asking for the sales, by using this assumption-based psychology that I call the invisible sales method. It exists nowhere else in the world. I'm a former psychiatric nurse turned entrepreneur. I've used this stuff to generate over 22 million in sales myself, and my clients have used it to generate over 200 million without actually having to sell to anyone. Now look, if you're interested in this stuff or you want to learn more, just comment sales down below this video somewhere. Click the link in the description. There's loads of ways for you to get in touch with me. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Conversations cost nothing. All I ask though is if you request to speak to me or my team, you show up for the meeting, because if you don't show up for the meeting, we'll blacklist you and take you off the list. And that's just a simple thing that we have in our business, where I'm very respectful. And what that means is if you choose to ghost me or not show up to something, I will respect you. It's your choice. It's your life. I don't govern it. You do whatever you want. But I also respect myself and my team to the point where we're not going to give you another opportunity to do that to us again. We'll never put ourselves in the same situation again. So you'll never get a second appointment. It's just how we work. Okay. So hopefully you're respectful and you're like me. You don't like being ghosted, so you don't ghost other people. So if that's you, then comment the word sales down below. Let's have a conversation. Let me serve you. Let me help you in some way or form. If I can't, I'll tell you I can't. If I can, I'll tell you I can. And I'd love to work with you one-to-one over the next 12 weeks and implement the invisible sales method into your business. Okay, it's not a course, it's not a program, it's mentoring, consulting, and applying it into your business right now. So if you want to do that, comment sales down below or click on the link in the video description. Let's book a meeting, let's have a conversation, and let's get you closing using the invisible sales method.